I guess I can get us started. We're a couple minutes over. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Nia D'Amelio. I'm the communications coordinator for ReFed, and I'm just going to do a little introduction and then turn it over for the experts. But I did want to ask everybody, how are we feeling? Final day of Summit. Thumbs up, thumbs up. Okay, yes. Applause and cheering. Okay, great. Well, for those of you leaving at lunch, I hope we can leave you with a good taste in your mouth. And for those staying a little longer, I hope that the rest of your day goes really well. This is our composting session. And as I'm sure many of you know, nearly 70% of surplus food is wasted, but composting offers us a solution. There are many economic opportunities, including cost savings and job creation. There are technological innovations and chances to collaborate with stakeholders across sectors right in our backyard. Engaging in composting offers us a chance to participate in making our future more sustainable. But where are we in our composting journey? And what do we have yet to do to shape the future of composting into one that's accessible, affordable, transformative, and so much more? Those are some of the questions that we will try to start answering here today. I'm sure we won't answer them all in 50 minutes or so, but we'll do our very best. So I would love to introduce our moderator, Nora Goldstein. She is the editor and publisher of BioCycle Connect and biocycle.net, the Organics Recycling Authority, and she is also on ReFed's Advisory Council. She is extremely knowledgeable and ready, and more knowledgeable and ready than I, so I will turn it over to her, and she will get you guys started.
Thank you, Nia, and don't ever underestimate your expertise when it comes to this topic, because, yeah, we're all part of the system. Welcome, everybody. It's really exciting to have a session on composting at the ReFed Summit, and sort of my role in the advisory council with ReFed. I'm always the token, you're the organics recycling person. So. Really quick, BioCycle was founded in 1960 as the journal Compost Science by my father. Late 70s, he took that journal, started a family company, and so I've been in this space for many decades, and am passionate about the topic, believe in its potential. So we have a great panel this morning. I'm going to do very brief introductions and then ask each of them just to amplify where they plug into the composting universe. So starting on my immediate left is Paula Luu. She's Senior Project Director at Closed Loop Partners, which is an impact investment firm and innovation center focused on the development of the circular economy, and Paula leads Closed Loop Partners Composting Consortium, which has just released a bunch of exciting reports. Next to Paula is Brian Fleury. He's Senior Vice President, North Division at Denali. Denali specializes in residuals management with a focus on repurposing waste through composting, land application, and other advanced technologies. Next to Brian is Brenda Platt, who directs the Composting for Community initiative at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. Brenda and I are almost on the same trajectory of decades in the business. Her current focus is on distributed composting that encompasses composting at homes, community gardens, farms, and other venues. And our fourth speaker, who was going to be here but had to cancel, Linda Bragan with the Environmental Law Institute. I'm going to just say a few remarks from her in a little bit. She has colleagues in the room here today, so questions if you're specifically interested in ordinances related to how to accelerate food waste reduction, composting, compost use, they're the go-to folks. So starting with Brenda, I'm hoping you can just take up to 2 minutes to just give us a little more color on that brief introduction I did.
Do anything? No, working, okay. Hey, thanks for coming today. I'm with the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. We're a national nonprofit organization that was founded in 1974. We celebrated our 50th anniversary just last month, yay. And I've been there for 38 years of that journey, and it has been quite the rodeo, let me tell you. We have a vision of thriving, diverse, equitable communities, and the way that we promote that is through solutions that empower our citizens and communities and independent businesses. If I had to sum up what we do in one word, the word would be, can anybody guess? Come on, say it. Community, that's good. Empower. Anybody else? Local. Thank you, Regina. Local. Institute for Local Self-Reliance. So when we start talking about infrastructure, you hear me talk a lot about that. Local, local, local. And we bring that lens to all the work we do. So we have, we fight Amazon. We fight the proliferation of dollar stores. We basically are fighting kind of the corporate concentrated power and trying to promote solutions. So we are promoting community broadband, we promote community banks, we have an energy democracy initiative, which is opposing the outsized control of monopoly utilities and promoting community solar and community wind power and the like. We are fighting for independent pharmacies and bookstores, and we bring that same lens to the work we do in the composting field. And so, you know, if you look at the waste sector, it's by some measures a $90 billion waste sector. And can any of you guess how many companies dominate that? A little bit more than one. Five. 5 companies, $90 billion. And one of the beauties of, I think, composting is that it can be small scale, large scale, and literally everything in between. And so, and we don't tend to ship our banana peels from one side of the country to the other. You know, that can be done locally. So I'll be talking more about how we can promote a diversified and distributed infrastructure.
Great. Brian.
Thank you, Brenda. We support local, and but on a national scale. So, because because we need to, you know, I totally agree. The only way you're going to actually, you know, be profitable in the business is you've got to be close to the source of the waste and process it that way. So I work for Denali Water Solutions. We're an Arkansas-based company, but we operate in all 48 lower states and Puerto Rico, and we really you know, repurpose waste is our motto, but really anything you know, organic residual based, we're pretty much managing it throughout the country, somewhere in the country, and really looking for the most environmentally friendly, within the regs, and cost efficient for our customers. So we really have, you know, we're managing from. Today, I'm just going to focus on the food waste side of it, you know, food residual side, but there's also the food processing and manufacturing side of the business that we handle a lot of that waste stream that most of us don't see. You know, they're in the plants, but they create a large amount of waste on that end as well, and we're trying to find the most cost-effective, environmentally friendly outlets for that versus going to landfill or you know, going that route. So in 2021, our company bought acquired another company called Organics with an X, and that's when we really expanded throughout the lower 48 with our organics collection business, where we're going around and collecting from supermarkets throughout the country. You name them, we've probably touched them at one point or another. And it's a decentralized model versus, you know, a centralized model where, you know, a local model where we're trying to get all of those stores that don't have the infrastructure currently and trying to bring them into an area where there is some sort of recycling effort. It costs a lot of money to go all the way up to the Canadian border and try to recycle that material because they don't have other outlets currently in some of those communities. So that's kind of what we're doing. But composting is my background. I've been in the composting. I'm in my 3rd decade in composting. Straight out of college, got into it selling finished compost, and then got into operations, and now leading a larger area currently with my role within the company. So that's a little bit. We'll talk more about composting, which is my passion.
Is this thing on? Yep. Hey, good morning. I've been looking forward to this panel because I think there's so much shared values and vision across the four of us, really, in preparing for this session. But we each bring a unique perspective, I think, based on where we sit in the ecosystem. My name is Paula Luu. I'm a senior project director, as Nora mentioned, at the impact investing firm Closed Loop Partners. I'm the new kid on the block in the composting world. I guess a little bit about Closed Loop Partners, if you're unfamiliar. We're based in New York City. The impact investing firm focuses in 4 key areas. That's food and agriculture, textiles and apparel, plastics and packaging, and what this 4th bucket we call like enabling technologies, really driving visibility into supply chains. And across those 4 areas, what we're really trying to do is support through several mechanisms the transition from a take, make, waste model into a circular supply chain across those 4 sectors. We have 3 business verticals. We have a capital management vertical that includes several investment strategies from venture to buyout. We have an operating arm. We are currently the largest privately held recycler in the United States with 21 MRFs across the US. And then my team is the Innovation Center. That's the Center for Circular Economy, where we leverage pre-competitive collaboration. So it's a big tent approach where I'm lucky enough to be working with Fortune 100 companies, composters, packaging manufacturers, academic institutions, including ReFed, including Nora, among many other stakeholders. And the initiative I lead is the Composting Consortium. Our vision is to help scale up food waste composting infrastructure, which is nascent and in much need of financing in its current state. And we also, with an eye, I should caveat, with an eye towards creating end-of-life solutions for food contact compostable packaging. So really want to see organic circularity scale within the United States, and looking forward to digging into this.
Wonderful. Thank you all. And before we jump in, I just thought I'd give a literally less than a 2-minute, what is the state of composting in the US? So BioCycle does a lot of survey and data collection work. And so all in, we're really talking about, and this is such an about number, 5,000 composting operations in the US. That includes decentralized, centralized, on-farm, on-site facilities at universities, correctional facilities. By far the biggest segment of the sector is yard trimmings or green waste composting, depending on what part of the country you're from, which is literally just what garden waste, leaves, brush, that sort of thing. In 2023, BioCycle conducted a nationwide survey of full-scale food waste composting infrastructure in the US. And by full scale, we define that as facilities that operate year-round can receive truckload volumes of food scraps, and I think it's 2,500 yards, or I can't think it's yards, a year. So there's not the teeny, but definitely includes decentralized. And we found barely over 200 facilities. A couple others have started since then, but we've, in the grand scheme of things right now, food scrap composting is pretty small. Opportunities, composting, I wrote this and I'm like, this is so good. But composting is a slam dunk for managing food that is no longer edible, and compost is a gift that keeps on giving, to put it simply. So that is truly the opportunity. It works, it's proven, applications for markets, wonderful research, all slam dunks. So why aren't we seeing more of it? Well, the barriers are to site a new facility, what we call like a greenfield, is a bear. It is expensive, it takes a really long time, and it's not for the faint of heart. And that's really, when you're trying to do more of a centralized facility, And so you run into that, whether it's zoning issues, public opposition. And so, where we've really seen the growth in terms of brand new facilities in the decentralized, and because they don't face a lot of those same barriers. Two other things I just want to say is we are just in the last year or so or maybe a couple of years with introduction of in-home food waste recyclers. And there's a perception, they're marketed as food waste composters. You can make compost in 24 hours. Others say it's 48, others say a week. You cannot do that. Composting is a biological process that requires several phases of processing, and you cannot make compost in 24 hours. Don't use it like a compost. So there's been a little bit of discussion of that here, so you're hearing it from us. The very last thing, because we also want to get into policies, is that policies and regulations, the optimum policies are policies and regs that incentivize with baked-in continual improvement based on the experience of the operations. So if you allow facilities to take 100 tons of food scraps per year with a very lower permit thing, and it's working, then let's not just leave it at that. Let's go back to our regs and improve them. And the model state for that, in my opinion, is New York State. So that's the overview. Happy to get into more details, but I'm going to pivot down there. I do. So I want to just, is this on? Yes. Okay. I want to kick off for all three of you to address this open question of what is your vision for compost infrastructure? And what tools, for example, compost market incentives, public-private partnerships, can accelerate infrastructure development? So Paula, since we went this way, we'll now go this way.
Yeah, I shared our vision in the opening, but the fact that, I don't have to tell this room, right? Like, we all understand the impact of food waste at landfill, and it's such a low-hanging fruit in terms of climate mitigation, building up the infrastructure to absorb whatever food waste remains while deploying strategies in reduction and prevention is absolutely a no-brainer. And I think food waste is a diverse category, right? Like, not all food waste is equal. And what I'm particularly keen on, and where the consortium focuses its efforts, is on solving for the most complex organic streams that exist today, and that's post-consumer organic waste, where the food is highly variable, a lot of watermelon rinds in the summertime, a lot of maybe heavier meats and fats in the wintertime, but it might also include food contact compostable packaging. And so what we're seeing in the market over the last 10 years as new materials have entered, as diets and trends have changed, is that this feedstock is diversifying. At the same time, collections has also increased. Like, we did a data project last year together, and we found that curbside organics, or organics collection in general across the United States, has increased 50% since the last time the survey was done, I think about 2 years ago, before that. So there's a lot of tailwinds in terms of helping the industry grow. It's a toolbox. It will require policy. It will require investment, probably flexible capital, blended finance in general. And I think an openness for public-private partnerships and collaboration to innovate around existing business models and create visibility to create the flows to move food waste from landfill to infrastructure.
So food waste composting is pretty straightforward. It's not, once you get the food waste and it's clean, and I'm going to stress clean, It's not that complicated to do from that point. Our biggest challenge is how do we collect it and how do we get it clean? And that's what we all struggle with. When I'm at U.S. Composting Council, a lot of sessions, a lot of talks around the bar, a lot of everything is, all right, what are you taking in? Are you only taking in a clean stream? Are you taking in post-consumer? Are you taking in pre-consumer? And when you're taking that in, what are you doing about contamination? Because we do not have a business model unless we can sell the product on the back end. Every compost facility that's failed, and I've seen a lot of them over the years, is because they couldn't sell the product on the back end. They kept taking it in on the front end, and then they get backed up on the back end. They run out of room. That's when they run into environmental issues. So solving for contamination is going to be key to how we expand compost, and the technology and the infrastructure needed to remove that. There's no way to say that we're just going to do it through education. It's not going to happen. It's got to be education, and then it's got to be advanced technology at especially the larger scale composting facilities that have got to be able to remove those contaminants as much as possible on the front end and then on the back end again, and to make sure that we have a sellable product. Public-private partnerships, I think, are key to advancing the growth of the infrastructure, because the municipalities have inroads that a lot of private companies don't have, especially when it comes to regulators and such, that they can get things done. They've got land a lot of times where a public or a private company like us wouldn't be able to get in, and having those public-private partnerships are key. And why they would need a private company like us, because we've got 30 years of experience running these facilities and marketing the product on the back end, which is just as key as anything else. Again, if they can make a quality product, but they don't know how to sell it, then you're not going to have a business model that's going to work. So I think there's strong believer in public-private partnerships. We've been running New York City's composting operations since 2007. Rockland County since 2005. We do City of Phoenix, City of Grand Rapids, City of Ann Arbor, and they're great models. And we've really developed great relationships with those communities and continue to expand the amount that we're processing through those facilities and the amount that we're then selling on the back end back into closing the circle.
So infrastructure policy. On the infrastructure, I'll just kind of underscore the point I was making earlier, that we think infrastructure should be defined to include the small and the hyper-local. So if you're a local government and you're thinking about the infrastructure and capacity you need, don't rule out home composting. If you get 10,000 households home composting, you're not collecting that material, you're saving money. And also, we've become so good at removing the yard waste that our backyards are starved for organic material. Why do you think that trees drop the leaves to nourish the trees? So, there's other benefits to getting your households to home compost. You need capacity for some materials that you don't want to go in your bin. I've been fastidiously measuring my food scraps before it goes out, and I handle 74% at the home, and the bones and the meat and the science projects go to the curb, because I'm lucky I have curbside collection. So it's a lot that can be done in your backyard, and it's cheaper. So if you don't have access to land, or the permitting is a challenge, that's also capacity that can come on faster with lower cost and quicker. And I think some of the studies have shown that households are the biggest generators. I think it's 40% of food waste. So, and it's under-resourced. It's like, oh, well, that's not going to, we'll do a little program. But the policy plays a big role in that. But hyper-local, community scale, we've got Marvin and Kenny here from Baltimore Compost Collective is just an example of a hyper-local community composter that's collecting with electric vehicles and bikes. And so they don't have to be diesel. So when you're switching from diesel to electric, and you're supporting the community and engaging youth in the process. So there's so many benefits, social, economic, and environment, when you do hyper-local. And one of the things I love about ReFed, just a shout out to ReFed, is that you're so good at like whole systems, food systems thinking. And, you know, I have to say that it's, you know, the contamination is an end of pipe issue. It's critical, we have to fix it, but we need to think upstream. So these are structural problems that also require infrastructure and capacity. And I brought this up in another breakout session, I think the first day, but when we look at where our food's coming and where people are shopping, there's a astounding proliferation of dollar stores. There are more dollar stores than Targets, McDonald's, Starbucks, Walmart's combined in this country, and it is aggressive. It's in rural and urban areas. And the food that's being sold there, it is packaged. At best, it's frozen waffles and canned peaches. So we're going to be getting more contamination from our food system because of these structural issues of taking over local grocery stores and even other supermarkets. So this is a really an important kind of whole systems way of thinking about our food system, and the policies play a role not only in promoting composting, but at all levels to keep dollar stores out of your community and promote independent local grocery stores with healthy food from local farmers. But on the policy side, I'll just say DC is an example of, they passed a bill for a home composting rebate of $75. You qualify for the rebate if you take a training course. So there's all kinds of incentives that are really easy to pass. We're promoting in Maryland, if we introduce it next year, it'll be the 4th year it's being introduced, but a $2 per ton surcharge on incinerators and landfills that would go into a fund that would then fund organics infrastructure. And there's like 8 states that have done this successfully, not just for composting, but also for like recycling and litter prevention. So, and $2 is really low. I think in New York, the state wants a $5 per ton surcharge. It's one of their legislative priorities, and it would create a $133 million fund. So anyway, there's a huge menu of policies, and just get on the map. There's no excuse for not passing policies, because there's procurement, and then there's the carrot, there's the stick, and everything in between.
So this question isn't on the script, but because it's now come up a couple times, 1 minute each. So it has to do with contamination management, right? And the Composting Consortium did an analysis of the cost of contamination to composters, and Paula, you can say the exact number, but you're more the localized, hyper-local, decentral. You're more, I would say, by comparison, centralized. Have you seen, like, how much contamination do you wrestle with at the scale that you are, and the analysis that you did of the 10 facilities? Big loaded question, but this is the where the rubber meets the road, I think. So just how does your approach manage, see contamination coming in?
Yeah. Well, as Einstein said, the smart person solves a problem, but the genius avoids it. So we want to avoid contamination. So upstream, I think talking about infrastructure, we should be having more infrastructure for reusable and durable food service ware at every single food establishment. So, compostable ware may be on the path. I'm become a little bit more jaded. I'm whispering this. Being filmed here, but I think we really have to move to durables and get rid of a lot of the plastics that's coming into our waste stream. And the same when you go to a local grocery store. There's a proliferation of zero waste stores and bulk buying. So this is, again, it's the dollar store versus moving towards less packaging to begin with. I think when you privilege the large-scale industrial compost sites, we're seeing now whether it's, and also anaerobic digestion, Denali, you do both, right? But there's a trend now to add depackaging systems. So, and the message that supermarkets are getting is commingle all your packaged stuff. Don't worry, we have a depackaging system, so we'll be able to handle it. And so we know community composters in our network that are in Massachusetts and Vermont that have lost market share from their clients, Hannaford's, and it's all being don't want to deny all these facilities, but being a black hole to another AD facility in Maine, and so they've lost their source separated streams because all the stuff is now going to a system that has a depackager, and it becomes harder to compete with those systems. So we do need some policies to help level the playing field. But most of the community composters that we work with report very low contamination levels. Sorry, that was probably more than a minute, Nora.
I'll try to keep it to a minute. Hannaford's not one of our customers, but we've got from a local level, the super local level that you're talking about, the community composters. Absolutely support them. Help build multiple facilities in New York City over the years. Red Hook, Gowanus, helped build. Literally oversaw the construction of those. But those are super focused people that are running those, and the people that are actually contributing the food waste into those are really focused on keeping contamination out. So it's a different waste stream than when you go to try to capture the larger waste stream. And when you go to so let's say it's the 80-20 rule. The 20 at best is that smaller, is that really concentrated, those that want to do the good. And then you've got the other 80 that are, more like a lot of people in my own family that just, I catch just throwing everything away. And we've got to solve for both if we're going to capture that 40% of home, that waste stream. And for right now, we've got to implement. I know contamination is going to come in the door, and I got to figure out a way to solve for that contamination, or I'm not going to be able to take that volume of waste stream coming in the door anymore. So we're currently doing a lot of that through depackaging, and we can talk about that a little bit more after. But we talk about microplastics and such. I would rather capture it up front, shred it, pull out all the big plastic that I can up front, versus going into my system and then trying to capture it on the back end when it's then been pulverized and pulverized and pulverized, and now I've got a million small pieces of plastic. I'd rather try to pull as much out of it on the front end as I can and capture that before it goes into my process, because it continues to break down as we pulverize the material through the process. So, this is yours, sir. Yes.
Okay, 1 minute.
You can have a minute and a half.
That's okay. Equality. I'll keep it to a minute. First, I think let's define contamination. That's probably, or I'll say how we define contamination in this study. So we define contamination as anything that the composter didn't want. But by and large, it was packaging. And then specifically, the highest levels of contamination, 80% of the contamination that the 10 composters that we worked with, 80% of the contamination they received was plastic, conventional plastic, and largely films. So that's contamination. Costs. It's incredibly costly for these very busy, time-poor composters to deal with contamination. They typically run really lean teams at their operation sites, but the data that we collected, again, with this cohort of 10 found that about 21% of a composter's annual operating cost is in some way, shape, or form going towards managing contamination. And that is true. Contamination is a reality that yard waste composters face, that composters who accept food waste, whether or not they accept compostable packaging, and it's true of composters who do accept compostable packaging. So no one's immune. This is a challenge that Brian brings up that every composter has to deal with, and I wish I had an invention or innovation that could solve for it, because I'd be doing that and probably very wealthy. But I think if there's any entrepreneurs in the room right now, if there's one challenge to solve in the value chain, I think it's figuring out how to sort organic waste ahead of the facility or further upstream. There's neat innovations that I'm seeing, with smart bins that New York City has deployed as an example.
Yeah, it was all a minute. We're in a different, zone of space and time. So I'm going to go to individual questions for each of you, and Paula, the one to just hand it right. Do you have a?
I think I handed you a mic. You might have 2 mics now. Oh, I have a mic. Oh,
Yeah,
my bad.
Okay, so, all right, where was it? If you could expand on compost, the kind of the investment side of this, because you're completing an investment report within the composting sector. And what must be true to maximize facility profitability and return on investment?
Thank you for the question. We are coming out with an investment report, or rather a primer that's geared towards investors, policymakers, and composters that will come out next month. So reach out to me if you want a link to that report once it's live. Let's talk about, I'll start my response by first maybe explaining the typical, how a composter makes money, and then what the typical ROI is. So a composter makes money. It's different than recycling facilities, which policymakers need to understand. The most of their revenue is made on the front end, so they get paid a tipping fee to receive material, and then they also make money selling compost at the end. About 75 to 80% of a composter's revenue typically comes from that tipping fee. More usually if they're also like in the hauling side of things. But compost sales make up a small portion of the annual revenue, and that's a function of many reasons, but probably the biggest reason for that is that compost prices haven't kept up with inflation. They've been quite stagnant for the last 20 years, at least from what we've been seeing. Then food waste composters, their capital costs are higher compared to yard waste facilities, even in the permitting process, which is very, very early on before they're generating any kind of revenue. They're looking at, let's say up to $250,000 more that they spend in the permitting process to get the appropriate permits to set up. And then your CapEx costs or your equipment costs is different depending on how much you want to process and what kind of technology you want to deploy. But let's say anywhere between $1 to $20 million in equipment. And that doesn't include the land and all that. When we've worked with composters in the space, generally the ROI or return on investment that we're seeing is about 6 to 8%. So that's a really important IRR to keep in mind when we're thinking about how to finance this space, because it means that certain financing vehicles are more and less applicable to this industry, where it needs there's long lead times before you're making a single dollar at a facility, and yeah, I think I've answered that question.
Yeah. No, that's excellent, and I just took a note of the time, so I want to try to leave. I was hoping for 15 minutes. I think it's going to be 10 minutes for you all to ask questions. Brian, compost policy tools and regulations in your mind that can help and hinder scaling infrastructure. So you've had a lot of experience with dealing in different states with regulations and policies. What do you think are the key missing components in existing policies that could really help to scale infrastructure, accelerate the pace at which we can create infrastructure?
So every state is so unique, and that's part of the issue, when, especially if you deal with as many states as we operate in. I think we operate 22 different composting sites over, I don't know, probably 15 states. And every one of those is unique to the regulations, and one of the biggest obstacles we have as we try to either get a new site permitted or try to get a minor or major modification, especially adding food waste in or another waste stream into the process, is that we have to deal with different departments within the department. So, so like in New York State, you have the Department of Environmental Conservation, the DEC, but then you've got to go to the water department, the solid waste department, the air, so you're dealing with all the, at most states, you're dealing with at least 3 different departments, and the policy, the regulations don't always match up. So trying to get all of them in a room, trying to get all of them to agree on the same thing, that is, pushing this, pushing organic diversion and recycling forward is very difficult. You could have one champion in that room, or two of the 3, but that third one holds you up. So having, literally having somebody at the departments that would be, that could actually pull the various, necessary regulatory groups together, but also towards one purpose, which is to help expand the organic infrastructure. So that is I would say that's our biggest challenge that we see over and over again. And just the underfunding of or what they tell us is the underfunding and the cutting of their programs and their departments creates a lag time, which is, we don't get responses for 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, because they say they've got a stack of other ones that are on their desk and they just literally don't have the time to get to it. So, so we need quicker responses. We need deadlines on how quickly, if we put a permit application in, there should be a 30-day review period for them to at least come back to you and give you an answer. This needs more information, this is approved, this is denied, or whatever. But we need timelines from the regulators, because we're all on timelines. We have commitments that we have to make, and when your clients are coming to you and saying, well, when is that going to be built? When's that going to be up and running? And you say, well, I don't know, because I don't know when they're going to get back to me on the permitting side. And it's a huge issue for us.
Thank you. And Brenda, you mentioned a few minutes ago about any kind of policy, just get policy going. And so at the local level, where is the best intervention? If you could speak, because, to the compost ordinance, or that tool of an ordinance. Yeah. And then if there's any, reflection, because you're, again, at the other end of the decentralized, to where the profits are locally in composting.
Yeah, and before I answer the policy question, I just want to say, we have 340 organizational members of our Community Composting Coalition in 47 states, plus D, Puerto Rico, a handful of other countries, including Iran and Russia and Lebanon, which is kind of interesting because there's food everywhere, there's those food scraps everywhere, and so it can be hyper-local. And so I think when it comes to policy, if your community is doing a zero waste strategy or a solid waste plan or the 10-year solid waste plan, look at Baltimore's. If you went to the session this morning, excellent climate action plan and zero waste plan. And shout out to Sophia in the back there. But really has this thread of local and equity and community engagement throughout. So when it comes to policy, there's opportunities not just to pass legislation at the local level, which can be challenging, but if you're running a department, or you can encourage your local city or county to integrate composting and local, hyperlocal, and community solutions as a nature-based strategy in your climate action plan. We have a guide on that we released last month, by the way, on our website. But there's solid waste plans to be integrated. There's home composting policies. We're working with Environmental Law Institute now. If you're in the room, put your hand up. Who's here? Yes, thank you. So maybe we'll get some more discussion on that, but we'll be releasing, Environmental Law Institute with NRDC will be releasing a municipal zoning ordinance later this summer as a model, but we're doing work on health soil policies. So there's a whole bunch of cities that have passed policies that, hey, if you're a construction company and you've disturbed that soil, you can't put back subsoil. You now have to have soil with a certain percentage of organic matter, which is driving the composting market, because if you're not driving supply, demand, you're not driving the supply and the building of the infrastructure. So all of those procurement policies, healthy soil policies, taking the wide view that composting is not just trash reduction, but it's food system resiliency, it's growing local food and building community and dealing with blighted neighborhoods like they're doing in Baltimore. And I'll just mention one other thing, because financing, because Paula's here, is such a big obstacle to growing community scale composting, but right now they're serving parts of the country that have no access. So they're in, Louisiana or parts of Florida or Alabama. They're doing multifamily housing. They're serving public housing in New York City. The city cut its budget for community composting, but Compost Power, run by the amazing Domingo Morales, has got composting in like 8 public housing communities, and he is actually getting credit from the New York City Public Housing Authority for reducing rat populations in those public housing, because he is controlling the food waste now. He's had to get some smart bins in order to compete, make it easy for the drop-off, and actually increase the amount of materials he's taking. So now he has to do all the meat and everything that the city's collecting, and he's doing that locally and driving out the rodents and getting credit. So nobody tell me you can't do it in an urban area successfully. So there's some great, and he has a great music video out recently, so check it out. Yeah.
You've got to check him. It's inspiring.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, 10 minutes. All right. So I think the very last question that we had for the panel was, how do you see, after being at ReFed for a day and a half or doing the tours, where composting fits into the larger ecosystem of food recovery, rescue. But if we have time at the very end, we'll get to that. But for now, I just want to see questions from the audience for the panel.
Whoever set this up was much taller than me. I'm Joelle from Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, and I have a question for you, Brenda. So oftentimes grants are limited by the outcomes and outputs that you can measure, and home composting is kind of hard to measure how much diversion is achieved. So if you can give any detail, if you know of any successes in measuring those outputs and outcomes, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, measurement is really important. And you can maybe build that into your grant, that if you're going to do an incentives program or a pilot, you can give households who participate a free scale, and there's easy ways to create apps for them to add it on their phone and weigh. Not as easy as the mill system, I have to admit. But maybe there's a pilot there too, which would be worth exploring. But we did a guide called Yes in My Backyard, and it's actually a guide for local governments, and we featured about a dozen home composting programs that were supported by local government, and there's a lot of variety in there, and data was, I think Austin probably did the best, that every year they evaluated their data, and then improved their program every year, but there's some case studies there.
Questions for Paula. There's a real issue with contamination from compostable serviceware, and I believe the consortium, the composting consortium that you're working with, is looking for ways to find packaging that's compostable. Have you looked into alternatives to compostable packaging, more along the lines of the durables, what I call reusables, and behavior change? Because I think we have systemically a problem in calling types of serviceware compostable, assuming that it will be used, can be break down in any system, and it doesn't necessarily. And then the confusion with plastic as compared to compostable for the consumer. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Yes, my universe is the world of composting and compostable packaging, but many of my colleagues, both within the Innovation Center and across the firm, from an investment perspective, focus on the reuse side of things. We tend to always include, regardless of the solution in the circular economy suite, right? reuse, recycling, composting. We have a lens around consumer behavior. So the Composting Consortium, our very first project when we kicked off, was a consumer behavior study to try to understand what kinds of communications, design, and labeling techniques really resonate with consumers and their understanding that this is compostable or this isn't compostable. And I think the lookalikes, as our contamination study highlighted, is really what's the challenge here. And so from a policy perspective, I see increasing number of states putting out labeling and design policies around how to label compostables, and those tend to have strong principles, right? We need to make sure that as more states do that the labeling policies are harmonized, so it's not like a green polka dots in one state and green stripes in another. But how can we universally communicate to consumers through green tinting, through at least 3 big call-outs on packaging that this is compostable, and if commercial composting is available, you can put it in the green bin. That's principles that we stand behind. I think there needs to be policy around lookalikes, right? Like biodegradable does not mean compostable, and so biodegradable as a term on packaging we do not support. I think it shouldn't be allowed. It should be like there should be policy around preventing the use of that word or lookalikes. Biofading is one that I've most recently seen, where polypropylene cup that has biodegradable additives, so it breaks down into tiny particles of polypropylene, which is a total nightmare. Hopefully I've answered your question.
Hi, kind of in a similar vein about compostable packaging, just wondering what your concerns are, if any, of the safety of like the ecosystem health, public health, of adding so many compostable products, an increasing amount of compostable products to the soil. I'm thinking like precautionary principle too, and the experience of PFAS.
Yep. Yeah, it's a great question. So my favorite study of the last 2.5 years that we've done is one around the disintegration of compostable packaging. We went big on this one. We tested 23,000 units of compostable packaging. It was different kinds of compostable plastics like PLA, PHA, PVOH, PBAT, and then different types of fiber packaging. We sent it to 10 commercial facilities, all who accept compostable packaging today, and then we measured the disintegration rates of that packaging, as well as took pile condition data at the facilities to understand not only how those products were performing, but the composting conditions that best supported the disintegration. It's on our website. If you just type in disintegration pilot at Closed Loop Partners website, you should be taken to the landing page. And
then we're Denali is part of a group called the Compost Manufacturers Alliance, CMA, composterapproved.com, and we partnered with multiple other large-scale composters throughout the country, in St. Louis and Colorado and up in the Northwest, and formed a group years. I think we're in year 7 or year 8 of this group, where to do exactly what Paula just noted, which is field testing of these compostables, because there's a lot of claims that it's compostable, but does it really work? And we did it from a business side because we need to know what works and what doesn't. And I had people sending me boxes of stuff and saying, "Tell me if this works." And I was like, I just had them piling up in my office. And so we formed this group because we need to know what's going to contaminate our end product. And so along the same lines, we've done a lot of the same testing that Paula just noted, but we have to do the testing. We have to know what's coming into our site is not going to contaminate our site. And I still think, to the original question, what's in it and what's it going to be long term, I still think there's a lot to learn. So I think we're just starting to learn.
Just want to add another layer to this, which is in addition to compostability with compostable food serviceware, there's also some other sustainability issues to think about, like where the feedstocks are coming from. And I think as somebody already mentioned, just because it's compostable doesn't mean it's plant-based. You can have 100% fossil fuel-based certified compostable products. So I've been working in this field for like 15 years with initially running the Sustainable Biomaterials Collaborative, and back in 2008, we issued sustainable purchasing guidelines for compostable food serviceware. And it not only had for the compostability, it had to be third-party certified, not just meet ASTM D6400, but was it GMO-free feedstocks? Was it free of PFAS? That was in there. In 2008, we called that out. So we knew it was being used as surface coatings for grease resistant back then.
No way of testing.
No, we had no way of testing. No, we were just saying you had to, you had to at least ask, anyway. But so those guidelines are still available, and when I've looked at them recently, they're still quite relevant in terms of the things to be thinking about and to be speccing. And there have been some state agencies using them to spec for, because a lot of times the purchasing that a state will use, local governments can pile onto those and adapt the same purchasing specs. So anyway, I just invite you to take a look, kind of thinking broadly about compostable ware.
So this particular topic of compostable packaging has been a debate, a collaboration, et cetera. So a lot more to scratch there, but I'd like to get your question before we have.
If we have time.
Yeah. And Nia's going.
Last question.
Okay, I'll try and make it easy. I think, Paula, this is just your report that's coming out soon. Lee Welpton, Director of Environmental Infrastructure at the Connecticut Green Bank, which is a new business unit we're standing up. Deeply appreciative of the experience and insight that you all represent. And so question for either of you, any of you, thinking about the different scales that you represent and how some of the solutions, whether hyperlocal or at a large-scale processing facility, where do you see the biggest capital gaps and capital needs to be able to really unlock and achieve more systemic change? And again, Paula, this might just be, check out our report next month, but yeah, thank you.
Well, I can channel Marvin a little bit. It's access to land is one of the biggest obstacles. And so, a lot of our community composters are getting kicked off their sites. It's happening in New York City, happened here in Baltimore. So having having access, and this is an issue with larger scale facilities too. So, smaller scale facilities don't need as much land, so it should be easier, but that's just one obstacle.
The larger scale facilities, what's happened a lot of times I can give a couple different examples, but where they thought they were far enough out away from receptors, and then the receptors moved in. And no different than a right to farm act, we need the right to compost or right to recycle, because we are going to, no matter what you do, this is an organic material that is going to cause, that it does have some odors, it does have some, so you can't create a nuisance, persistent nuisance, but there are going to be some, no different than farming. You're going to have some odors. You're going to have some, some different things that you got to manage and manage well, and best management practices. But to think that that it's not ever going to have a puff of smoke or a puff of smell or anything along those lines. It's important to to the right to compost and focus on that. And I know I think there was a legislation in Washington State where that was passed with that type of language. So.
And Paul, last word, if you want to.
Yeah, no, it's just a lot of pressure. I'm thinking carefully. Definitely check out the report that comes out next month. But maybe to add color for everyone here in the room. Going back to Nora's opening comments, we have 200 food waste composting sites and about 2,700 yard waste sites.
Give her 3,000.
Yeah, let's just round it up, 3,000. Scaling food waste composting, creating end of life for food waste is going to require a lot of CapEx dollars, before that facility will make a single dollar in revenue, and the appropriate capital that is applied to either do greenfields or retrofit yard waste facilities is going to be philanthropic, public, and flexible capital that can be borrower friendly. My colleague Jen Louie runs several funds with that philosophy and types of vehicles in mind. I think when those are the three forms of capital that will get the infrastructure to a point where then the private markets or market rate investors can come in and do a lot of consolidation, et cetera.
Nora, I got one thing to say. One really quick. That you often hear the politicians say, we're going to go to composting because it's going to save us money. We need to stop saying that, because the infrastructure's got to get built out before it can actually save money. So we need the money. The money needs to be put in now. Long term, yes, it can save money versus alternatives. But to get it off the ground, it's going to cost a lot of money, and we got to get that through. We got to get that message out.
I just want to say, if you haven't seen compost, I've got a jar here of black gold. So come take a look.